Of the approximately 2,900 generals and 291 admirals of the German Wehrmacht were killed in action, and around 2,800 survived the Second World War. Many of them were sentenced to death and executed during the war crimes trials, including their two highest representatives in the high command of the Wehrmacht, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keidel and Colonel General Alfred Jodl. In contrast, the general staff and the high command of the Wehrmacht, who were also accused there, were not convicted as a criminal organization. This was in contrast to the Waffen-SS, which the International Court of Justice in the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg, together with the General SS and the Death's Head units, had declared a criminal organization for war crimes and crimes against humanity. For their leaders, this automatically meant imprisonment or internment from or in which at least 32 SS generals committed suicide. Others were executed in Nuremberg, or the courts in the Soviet Union, or the countries now controlled by the Soviet Union, or were partly imprisoned in labor camps until 1955. In the Western occupation zones, however, something happened that is difficult to understand and can hardly be explained to a later generation in legal terms. Namely, that, for example, the Field Marshal of the Army, Erich von Manstein, was sentenced by a British military court to 18 years in prison in the war criminal prison Werl, from which he was officially released only on May 7, 1953. In contrast, members of the military representatives of the Waffen-SS, who had been declared criminals by the Nuremberg judges, were in some cases not even prosecuted. For example, their highest representative, the forefather of the military arm of the SS, SS Oberstgruppenführer and Generaloberst der Waffen, SS Paul Hauser, remained in custody until 1949. And the protagonist of this consideration, the founding officer of the Waffen-SS, SS Obergruppenführer and General of the Waffen-SS Felix Steiner, who originally came from the Reichswehr, had already been released from American internment in U.S. Internment Camp 8 in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, the former Jägerkaserne, in 1948. And had subsequently entered the services of the American Secret Service indirectly for a number of years. The reason for this collaboration between the U.S. Army Counterintelligence Corps, CIC, and the intellectual Steiner, who was considered one of the most capable officers in the Waffen-SS, was to provide them with valuable information about a possible war between the West and the Soviet Union at the beginning of the Cold War. For this, I quote from the book The Order Under the Death's Head by the Spiegel editor Heinz Hohne, which was published in 1967 and is above any suspicion of glorifying the SS. The leading head of the military reformers was SS Sturmbannführer and former Reichswehr officer Felix Steiner, whom an experience on the Western Front of the First World War had turned into a rebel against the conservative army leadership. He believed that the future belonged neither to the amorphous mass nor to the traditional individual fighter, but solely to the elite group fighter. He broke the dominance of the mechanical barracks drill, put a broad-based performance sport at the center of his training, and educated the soldier to become that type of terrain-knowledgeable hunter, stalker, and athlete that the British military writer Liddell Hart had once elevated to the ideal of the modern infantryman. Hart, who had been severely wounded as an infantry officer in the First World War, had already witnessed the almost complete destruction of his battalion on the first day of the Battle of the Somme in July 1916, which had profoundly shaped him for the rest of his life and prompted him to comment, "As a result of the teachings of Clausewitz applied by thoughtless students, generals were encouraged to seek battle at the first opportunity rather than seeking a favorable opportunity. Thus, the art of war was reduced to a mutual slaughter from 1914 to 1918. After the First World War, this highly regarded English military historian and strategist predicted the formation of mixed armored combat groups, similar to the composition of the tank divisions developed by Guderian, with tanks, armored infantry, and motorized artillery. Steiner had also already designed a number of training and organization plans in 1939, which made him so interesting for the Americans after 1945. He was born as the son of a high school teacher on the 23rd of May, 1896, in Stahlipunen, East Prussia, which is located about 12 kilometers from the Russian-Lithuanian border and about 140 kilometers east of Königsberg, an East Prussian town with around 6,000 inhabitants. His ancestors were originally the Protestant farmers and citizens who, along with about 20,000 others from Salzburg, were forced to leave their homeland in the winter of 1733 by the Archbishop of Salzburg because of their faith, and then largely found refuge in East Prussia due to the Prussian invitation patent issued by Frederick William I in 1732. After graduating from high school, Felix Steiner joined the infantry regiment of Boyen, 5th East Prussian No. 41 in Tilsit, as a flag cadet in March 1914, with which he also went into the First World War that started 4 months later. After participating in the battles at Gumbinnen from the 19th to the 20th of August 1914, from the 26th to the 30th of August at Tannenberg, and from the 6th to the 14th of September at the Masurian Lakes, he, now an ensign, was seriously wounded in the battles in Lithuania in November, and was awarded the Iron Cross Second Class. Promoted to lieutenant on the 27th of January 1915 and transferred to Fortress Machine Gun Department 1 after his convalescence, he then took part in the battles on the Dwina as a company commander in the Machine Gun Sharpshooter Department 46 from May 17 and from the 1st to the 5th of September in the victorious Battle of Riga. Sharpshooter machine gun departments were elite units established during the winter of 1915-16 with a strength of 1 officer, 7 non-commissioned officers, and 71 enlisted men, which were used for the first time in March 16 at Verdun to support infantry deployed in particularly difficult-to-defend sections. Between the 11th to 15th of September, 17, now also awarded the Iron Cross First Class, Steiner moved with his MG company to the Western Front, where they were deployed on the Ladies' Path, French Chemin de Dames. Then in the Third Battle of Flanders, which lasted until the 6th of November, subsequently from the 12th to the 29th of April 1918 at Kemmelberg, and from the 8th of August during the Allies' so-called 100 Days Offensive between Arras and Noyon. In his 1963 book, The Army of the Outlaws, Steiner wrote about these machine gun sniper divisions made up of the most experienced soldiers. Thus, the assault battalions became the pioneers of the counterattacks in the crises of the year 1918. The machine gun sniper divisions became the breakwaters of the attacks of an enemy rushing in masses. It was precisely these battles in the last year of the war that led him to realize that mass armies had to be countered with small units of highly trained and selected soldiers who, in combination with the technology they mastered, were not only a match for numerically superior masses of soldiers, but were superior to them. After the capitulation in November 18 and his discharge from the army in Danzig, Lieutenant Steiner had set up an infantry company subordinate to the East Prussian Volunteer Corps in January 19. After the restoration of internal order against communist efforts to establish a Soviet-style council dictatorship, the East Prussian Volunteer Corps, which numbered 15,024 men, was transferred to the Provisional Reichswehr on March 15, 19. After the deployment of Steiner's volunteer company in January 19 in the pacification of Königsberg, which was occupied by German Red Navy soldiers, the company was subsequently used in border protection and stationed in Heidekrug in the Memel territory, about 100 kilometers southwest of Königsberg. After being transferred to either the 5th or 8th Company of the Reichswehr Infantry Regiment 1 in 1921, Steiner successfully completed the compulsory military district examination in 1922, which at that time was routinely used to assess the suitability of every officer for the general staff. The early Bundeswehr also had a similar procedure known as the Army Selection Test. The Reichswehr saw Steiner from 1923 to 1930 in various staff positions. He also participated in the so-called Leader Assistant training, the War Academy replacement of the Reichswehr disguised due to the prohibition in the Versailles Treaty, and was repeatedly assessed as far above average. After his promotion to captain on the 1st of December 1927, he was appointed regimental adjutant of the Infantry Regiment 1 in Königsberg, where he stood out for clear command for training and education of the soldiers. His further rise in the military hierarchy of the Reichswehr seemed assured. But notwithstanding he had asked for his dismissal in 1933, and had retired in December with the character of a major, and in return in January 1934, he joined the Storm Detachment SA to become a training leader at the State Police Inspection West in Dusseldorf. As a reserve officer, he had been scheduled with the Chief of Army Command. As far as Steiner's political views were concerned, there is no doubt that, like the vast majority of officers in the Reichswehr, including the high-ranking officers who later joined the resistance, he had agreed with the National Socialists' seizure of power. However, it is not known why he left the army and joined the SA. Either the SA Chief of Staff Ernst Röhm recruited Steiner, or Steiner applied to Röhm. The result was that from 1934, Steiner became the training officer of the so-called Chief AW. As is well known, Röhm wanted to merge the combat organization of the National Socialist Workers' Party with the existing Reichswehr to form a large people's army in the form of a militia, which led to ongoing tensions between him and the generals of the Reichswehr. When the SA was then disempowered by the SS on the 30th of June, 1934, during the alleged Röhm Putsch, the 100 to 200 murders were even recognized as lawful 4 days later. Steiner, after the dissolution of the training office in 1935, entered the SS as a Sturmbannführer equivalent to major, where he initially became the commander of the 3rd Battalion of the SS Standarte 1 Germany, located in the Ellwanger Mühlberg barracks. On the 1st of July, 1936, he was then promoted to SS Standartenführer with the rank of Oberst and commander of this standard or regiment based in Munich. 3 months later, in October 1936, Steiner became a military instructor at the SS Leadership School in Bad Tolz. Even here, his training guidelines were in complete contrast to those of many high-ranking officers in the Wehrmacht, who placed more emphasis on academic background and theoretical training. In contrast, he had aligned his guidelines with the tactical principles of the assault battalions of the First World War, and particularly also with personality formation and physical training, but without neglecting the important formal service. Heinz Hohne described it in his book as follows. Indeed, Steiner had succeeded in creating this new type of soldier, selected volunteers, toughness of training, but also new forms of cohabitation and belonging of officers. Non-commissioned officers and men had made this possible. On May 20th, by order of Hitler, and in his presence at the Münsterlager military training area, an exercise also set up by Steiner took place. Combined arms combat of the SS Standarte Deutschland, with an army artillery regiment instructed to cooperate. The cooperation of the various weapons had worked with such almost unbelievable precision that a visibly impressed Hitler shortly afterwards ordered the establishment of an SS artillery standard equal to a regiment. 2 weeks before the war against Poland began on September 1st, 1939, on August 19th, all existing SS units were placed under the command of the Army. Commander-in-Chief and Steiner's motorized SS Regiment Deutschland was assigned to the Mixed Tank Division of Major General Werner Kempf. This tank division, named after its commander Kempf, was to serve as an experiment to test the cooperation between the Wehrmacht and SS troops, as the armed parts of the SS were called, from October 10, 1939. From September 1st to 3rd, 1939, Steiner's infantry regiment was deployed in the Battle of Mokra, and from September 14th to 29th in the Battle of Modlin, a fortress located about 40 kilometers northwest of Warsaw, which, together with the Warsaw Fortress and the Zamość Fortress, formed the Polish Fortress Triangle. After assault troops had penetrated into the area around the interior of the fortress, the Polish defenders capitulated on September 29th, for which Steiner was awarded the clasps of 1939 of the 2 Iron Crosses from the First World War. In November 1939, the umbrella term Waffen-SS was established as a collective term for all armed SS units. Then, on April 1, 1940, the SS Verfügungsdivision was formed from the merger of parts of the SS Verfügungstruppe with parts of the so-called Totenkopfverbände, and under the leadership of the former Reichswehr Lieutenant General and current SS Gruppenführer Paul Hauser. This later successively became the SS Division Reich, Mott, in November 1942, the SS Panzergrenadier Division das Reich, and in October 1943, the 2nd SS Panzer Division das Reich. However, on the 22nd of April, 40, with the daily order number 1481 of the SS Führungshauptamt, SS Main Office, the further fate of the SS Verfügungstruppe became apparent. By order of the Reichsführer SS, all armed units of the SS are combined in the Waffen-SS. The designations SS Verfügungstruppe and SS Totenkopfverbände are no longer to be used. This confusion contributed to the Waffen-SS also being broken in the Nuremberg trials. In the Western Campaign that began on May 10, 40, with battles in Holland, Belgium, and France down to the Spanish border, Steiner's regiment, unlike the other SS troops, had proven itself so well that he was awarded the Knight's Cross on August 15, 40, as the first member of the Waffen-SS. 2.5 months later, on November 9, 1940, he was promoted to SS Brigade Führer and Major General of the Waffen-SS and was commissioned to set up an SS division from Dutch, Danish, and Norwegian volunteers on the Heuberg military training area in the southwest of the Swabian Alb from November 20th, which received the name Wiking. This division was under German command, had German staff, and the command language was German. But unlike other units in the army, where there was a spirit of commissar, Steiner had, from the beginning, put the human relationship between the German superiors and the volunteers in the foreground, in addition to imparting purely military skills, and only used experienced German commanders and company leaders for the training. Anyone who did not meet his requirements was immediately transferred. On the 1st of April 1941, Steiner, here in January during training, reported the Wiking Division as ready for action. While the propaganda celebrated the soldiers serving in it from so-called Germanic or related peoples such as Flemings, Dutch, Estonians, Walloons, Danes, Swedes, Norwegians, and Finns, the reality was more sobering. Because while their share was less than 10%, the division was predominantly made up of Reich and so-called ethnic Germans. However, it is true that the Wiking was the first division of the Waffen-SS with non-German personnel. Further divisions with foreign soldiers were to follow. From the 22nd of June 1941, in the war against the Soviet Union, the Wiking Division had its baptism of fire on the 29th of June at Tarnopol. Subordinated to the 1st Tank Group under General Ewald von Kleist, who died in lifelong Soviet captivity on the 13th or 16th of November 1954, followed by exceptionally hard battles in the Battle of Rostov, which lasted from the 17th of November to the 2nd of December 1941, in which the Wiking was deployed together with the SS Brigade Leibstandarte. However, by the end of November, all the major units deployed for this purpose had suffered such heavy losses, including the Wiking and Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, that they were moved to the Mayos position, named after the river, for replenishment. On the 30th of January 1942, Steiner was promoted to SS Gruppenführer and Lieutenant General of the Waffen-SS. On the 22nd of April 1942, he was awarded the German Cross in Gold. From July to December 1942, the Wiking was deployed in the Caucasus with the 3rd Panzer Corps. On the 9th of November, it had been restructured into the SS Panzergrenadier Division Wiking. Steiner, who was in charge of the leadership of the 3rd Panzer Corps, received the Oak Leaves to the Knight's Cross as the 159th soldier for his successful storm run to the Caucasus on the 23rd of December 1942. After that, the Wiking Division was subordinated to the 57th Panzer Corps in the Rostov-on-Don area, and in the spring of 1943, during the defensive battles in the Donbass, it was subordinated to the 40th Panzer Corps. But despite all the initial military successes and the tactical subordination of the Waffen-SS to the army, a dark shadow had fallen over this part of the army. Hitler had granted the notorious and power-hungry Reichswehr SS Himmler authority and command over many matters, including the Waffen-SS. Among other things, he used this to, on the 25th of February 1941, now also obligatorily assign the SS members used for guarding in the concentration camps to the so-called Death's Head units of the Waffen-SS, and to use them in various Waffen-SS divisions. This circumstance was also a reason during the Nuremberg trials to declare the Waffen-SS a criminal organization. Steiner had rejected the civilian would-be soldier, Himmler, as a parvenu, and did not hesitate to loudly express his rejection. However, this did not change the fact that he carried out his orders until the end. On March 30th, 1943, Steiner took over the supreme command of the mainly from the Wiking established 3rd Germanic SS Panzer Corps, into which, from June, at the Grafenwehr military training area, the volunteers of the mainly consisting of Danes and Scandinavians, 11th SS Volunteer Panzergrenadier Division Nordland came. This formation of people from such different cultural backgrounds took place at a time when even foreigners must have been aware of Germany's impending defeat. Added to this were reports from their respective home countries of increasing resistance against the local German occupiers. So there were no prospects for those who, in the eyes of their compatriots, were nothing more than traitors collaborating with the Germans. On June 16, 1942, Steiner was honored by his Finnish brothers in arms with the Finnish Order of the Cross of Liberty First Class with breast star, oak leaves, and swords. On July 1, 1943, he was appointed SS Obergruppenführer and General of the Waffen-SS. After deployment in the Balkans in August, his armored corps, which by now consisted of more than half ethnic Germans from Romania, was relocated to the Army Group North by the end of the year. He took part from January 14th to March 1st, 1944, in the defense of the Soviet Leningrad-Novgorod operation, in the battle at the Narva bridgehead in Estonia, lasting from February to August, and from July 25th to August 10th in the Battle of the Tannenberg Line, in which around 22,500 German soldiers held up 137,000 Soviet soldiers, inflicting heavy losses. Here are the remains of these positions. Due to his leadership skills, Steiner was mentioned by name in the Wehrmacht report on the 1st of August 1944, and on the 10th of August, he was the 86th soldier to be awarded the oak leaves with swords to the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. After a 2-month break due to illness, he was appointed on November 26, 1944, in addition to his position as Commanding General of the 3rd SS Panzer Corps, also as the commander of the Panzer Army High Command 11. This was re-established on January 26, 1945, as the 11th Panzer Army, with which he fought in Pomerania and on the Oder from January 1945. Note the concentrated power of the Red Army in red in the south, compared to the handful of German units marked in blue. In March 1945, Steiner received the insoluble task of holding the hopelessly overstretched front between Neustetten and the Oder against the Soviet major attack as the commander-in-chief of the exhausted 11th SS Panzer Army. Although Steiner had managed to launch a counterattack in the first 2 days to distract the Soviet offensive threatening Berlin, it was then repelled by the superior forces of the Red Army. At the end of March 1945, he was appointed commander of the Army Group Steiner, which in essence only existed theoretically and consisted of the shattered remnants of these divisions. With this fragment of an army group, with in reality no more than 10,000 demoralized soldiers without much will to resist, including many members of the Volkssturm, and a dramatic lack of leadership, ammunition, and fuel, Steiner was supposed to liberate the encircled Reich capital from the north in the Battle of Berlin, an idea that could only be attributed to Hitler's desperate wishful thinking. As the only unit, the 11th SS Volunteer Panzergrenadier Division Nordland, which had shrunk to only 1,500 soldiers under the command of brigade leader Joachim Ziegler, had reached Berlin, but had been almost completely destroyed in the battles there, including its Panzergrenadier Regiment 23 Norge and the combat group of the Panzergrenadier Regiment 24 Denmark, which consisted of only 100 men. The photo taken in Selamäe, Estonia, in the spring of 1944 shows Ziegler as Waffen-SS Oberfuhrer and Chief of Staff of the 3rd SS Panzer Corps during the Battle of Narva. Regarding the death of Ziegler on May 2, 1945, in Berlin, I have this video that impressively describes the value of witness statements. In any case, after a realistic assessment of the situation, Steiner ignored Hitler's order and instead led the army group towards the Elbe, where it surrendered to American troops in the area between Wittenberge and Ludwigslust. He himself had been relieved of his command by Hitler on the 27th of April, 1945, for disobeying orders, and was also taken prisoner by the Americans on the Elbe on the 3rd of May, 1945. I mentioned it at the beginning. Although Steiner was held by the Americans in their internment camp 8 in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, he was already released on April 27, 1948. And although war crimes were also accused of the Wiking Division during his time as commander in the Nuremberg trials, all charges against him in Nuremberg had been dropped. In American internment, Steiner had agreed with the former district administrator Helmut Damerow and other individuals, with the permission of the U.S. Foreign Intelligence Service CIA, to establish a publication after their release that should advertise for an, quote, anti-Bolshevik German defense contribution. This then appeared from the 6th of June, 1951 as Deutsche Soldatenzeitung until 1953, with financial support from the CIA, from then on also promoted by the Federal Press Office. Steiner lived in Munich at the time, where he attempted to rehabilitate the Waffen-SS through writings and witness statements at trials against former subordinates. To this end, he repeatedly held talks with politicians from all parties represented in the Bundestag, even though they were well aware of the Nuremberg judge's verdict against the Waffen-SS. But back then, history was still a complete mosaic, unlike today, where you can pick and choose the pieces that suit you best in order to pass judgment. This fundamentally different view of history at the time went so far that the significant chairman of the Social Democrats, Kurt Schumacher, who was imprisoned from 1933 to 1945 in various concentration camps and almost died there, and who also coined the phrase that communists are nothing more than red-painted Nazis, exonerated the Wehrmacht soldiers and the members of the Waffen-SS from collective guilt accusations at the First Party Congress of the Western Social Democratic Party of Germany from May 8th to 11th, 1946, in Hanover. And in 1951, he met with representatives of the Mutual Aid Association of the former Waffen-SS members, HIAK for short, which was also co-founded by Steiner in the same year, and opined that it was not good for a young democracy to allow such a large group of dissatisfied people to emerge. At that time, when the war was still fresh in everyone's minds, a phrase had made the rounds. There is a huge difference between 20-year-olds launching a counterattack after a barrage of fire and a costly repelled attack by an overwhelming force, and people in suits and ties discussing right and wrong in war after a good dinner in a well-heated room. And indeed, after the intervention of the former Lieutenant General of the Reichswehr and later General of the Waffen-SS Paul Hauser on the 3rd of December 1952, even Chancellor Dr. Adenauer of the Christian Democratic Union had given a declaration of honor for the German soldiers of the Second World War before the German Bundestag, and extended this on the 17th of December to the soldiers of the Waffen-SS. Of course, this was only possible in the sign of the Cold War, and the statement made on the 22nd of January 1951 by the then Supreme Commander of NATO in Europe, General Dwight Eisenhower, the German soldier has bravely fought for his homeland. Unthinkable today, but at that time, without gasping for breath from the opposition, the German press, and least of all from those of the Western Allies, Chancellor Adenauer even traveled to the war criminal prison of Werl, located in the British zone during the federal election campaign in July 1953. There he visited the former commander of the 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitler Youth, who had been sentenced to death in 1945 and then to life imprisonment, SS Brigade Führer and Major General of the Waffen-SS Kurt Meyer, who was pardoned a year later. However, the Social Democratic Party of Germany also represented a similar line, including the deputy Helmut Schmidt, the war lieutenant of the Air Force flag, towards the former soldiers of the Waffen-SS. Thus, one can read in the October 2011 issue of Spiegel that Schmidt assured the Waffen-SS veterans at a HIAK meeting in Hamburg in 1953, quote, "He always felt particularly safe as a comrade in the Second World War when he fought alongside the Waffen-SS. Tempora mutantur et non mutamur in illis." Times change, and we change with them. In 1951, in addition to the founding of the German Soldiers newspaper, Steiner was commissioned by the United States Foreign Intelligence Service, CIA, along with other protagonists, to plan a propaganda instrument and military think tank for German rearmament. It then saw the light of the world on the 5th of January 1952 in Munich as the Society for Military Science and was financed with 240,000 marks until the beginning of 1953. In addition to the former Weapons-SS General Steiner, the board also included a member of the military resistance, the former First Lieutenant in Infantry Regiment 9, Auld Heinrich von Kleist-Schmenzen. In addition to these semi-official activities, Steiner was also the author of a series of articles on defense policy and 4 books. 1952, The Defense Idea of the Occident, 1956, From Clausewitz to Bulganen, 1958, The Volunteers, Idea and Sacrifice, and 1963, The Army of the Outcasts. He also traveled to Finland several times, where his old soldiers always welcomed him back. In 1966, he worked on the history of the Wiking Division and on a novel. Then, on the 17th of May, after he had neither called nor kept appointments for days, the bachelor's apartment was broken into, where they found him dead next to his bed. Felix Steiner had probably already succumbed to a heart attack on the 12th of May, 11 days before his 70th birthday. He was buried in Munich in the presence of thousands of his former soldiers.